Sorry for the interruption. I'll give you the floor now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This is my agenda for the next 20 minutes. I'll talk about why we have worked with Wadi. I'll talk about the technology behind, and then our test on Fanø, and then the next steps with Wadi. Now I need control on the screen. I have requested that, but it doesn't function. Just a moment. That's better. Yeah, my name is Søren Christensen. I work with sustainable tourism at the National Park Wardensee. Just need something down here, like that. First of all, why Wadi? In our area, we have 8 million overnight stays every year. And in the summertime, when the season peaks, there's over-tourism in some points. We can look into that, that the overnights will increase 3 to 6% every year from now on. It has done in the last years. We have reports from exhausted locals who says there's a lot of tourism here and might be too much. We can also look into that maybe there will come some climate tourists from Southern Europe in the summertime, where we have already filled up with tourists in the area. So we need some visitor management and some focus on code of conduct, and that we have brought together in our green nudging project. Together with the NTT Data and the National Park, we have made this Wadi, and I'll try to explain how it works. It's a technology where AI talks with data. It works like you have a QR code, you scan with your cell phone, and then it opens in a browser. It's not an app. We don't have to have guests to download an app. They just have to have a phone with a camera in their pocket. There's no tracking. There's no cookies in this solution. So people who is afraid of tracking and cookies can easily use it. And then we have ChatGPT and some data ChatGPT talks with. And the data, just a moment, here we have the data. We have some database and some online data we put in the database, satellite weather data and so on, mobile data, so we know how many and where they are on the island. Then we have the DOF database. It's a bird watching database. And all that data we put in our, in the ChatGPT. And then we have, doesn't function that well. Yeah, we have. Then we have a lot of content we have already produced. It might be some brochures, articles, it could be pictures, it could be web pages where we have produced content of what you can discover on the island Fanø. And we have, if you look back like 10 years, we have produced a lot of content we can put into this database. When a guest is speaking with Wadi, here's an example of a question: where can I see a large flock of birds? And then ChatGPT is making an answer, and the answer is made from this kind of data, like in the first part of the text, the DOF database. Someone has talked about what kind of birds has been seen on Fanø. Then we have some data from some data sheets. And then there's weather data about the water level in the next part of the text. There's some visitor management from mobile data. We will have them on the beach at early in the morning. So there's not that many persons on the beach right there. Then there's a lot of code of conduct in this answer about how to behave when you getting close to large flocks of birds and so on. Yeah. Just a moment. In spring last year, we started a test on Fanø. Fanø is a closed environment because it's an island. We know how many people is over there, visitors and locals. It's 12 minutes with the ferry, so we also have 12 minutes to speak with every guest on the island. There's 3,400 locals over there and a lot of tourists. And then we have a diverse island with small towns, large beaches, and a lot of nature and wildlife. And we tested from April until end of this year. And after the first test in the spring, we put some more data into the database because we could see on the first questions that we needed some more data to make the answers. It's a little bit difficult for me to flip those ones. There it goes.
Otherwise, you can perhaps just also ask Marco to change it if there's a huge. We can also make it like that. Okay.
Yeah. We put up QR codes. This is to the left. It's on the Esbjerg side on the ferry, where customers buy a ticket for the ferry. And to the right, it's on the waiting room on Fanø. We put up the small stickers with the QR codes. Next slide, please. And here to the left, we are on the ferry, where you are parking your bicycles if you're going on a bicycle to Fanø. And on the right, it's when you just arrive to the island. We tried to glue some stickers on the ground, but it was not that good. I think it disappeared very, very fast. But the ones on the ferries is still there. Yeah, next slide, please. Here we are our seal bench. It's just in front of the harbor on Fanø. You can see the seals in the background, and we put up the stickers there. And also we put up stickers out in the nature where we have other signs and where guests are reading about what they see in the area, and then we glued up the stickers with the QR code. Yeah, next slide, please. Then we also made a campaign online on social media. When you have an island as a test area, you can just locate and say we would like to have advertising to people located on Fanø with Danish or German language on the phone. And then we made some ads on Instagram and Facebook. Next slide, please. We tested from April until November. We have 1,500 real questions plus a lot of teasing questions where a lot of persons were trying to bring this waddy out on thin ice and asking a lot of different questions about a lot of things that's not happened on Fanø and so on. But 1,500 real questions. Compared to how many people who was on Fanø in the same period, it's only less than 1% that uses waddy on Fanø. The language on the phones using waddy was 50% Danes and then 16% Germans and so on. And we also experienced that in other activities that Germans are less likely to use the mobile phone when they're not close to a network. The roaming is still some topic for the German guests. Half of all the clicks came from. Can you just go back again? Yeah, half of all the clicks came from Meta, and half from scanning QR codes and posters and stickers. And it's not given that if you see a QR code in the area, you will pick up the phone and scan it. You have to make some kind of advertising or communication to get the scans. And Danes love the ads on Facebook, and Germans are more into the QR codes in the area. Yes, next one, please. Here's a category of the questions. We have tried to collect them, and we have built this Wadi as a nature guide primarily, but when we see of the questions, it's only 25% that involves nature and wildlife, and 75% is more normal tourist information questions. So yeah, that's a learning from this test. The next one, please. NTT has a plan to merge this Wadi platform with a visit data platform. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a big data project on the Danish west coast where visitor centers and camping sites, hotels, and so on are putting in booking data into a large database, and this is combined with weather data and counting of people with cameras and so on, and every one in this project has a dashboard where they can predict how many guests will come tomorrow or next week again, and then they can make plans from this. There also NTT will also merge this platform with Personi. It's another platform where they have this avatar people in hotel rooms or hotels in the front area and so on. Yeah, next one, please. And that's, of course, makes sense when we look at the questions. It's where the questions were more like normal tourist questions. Then it makes very much sense to merge with the visit data and the Personi. Oh, can you go back? We will try to write in this kind of green nudging in our next projects, and maybe get some money to the further development. And then we of course have to have a lot more users on the platform to have to make an impact to make the nudging to move people around on the island. Yeah, next one, please. This is a sticker, and this is yeah, it's one of the stickers from the ferry, and it will be in the presentation afterwards. And the QR code is active, so you can actually scan the QR code and then talk to Wadi afterwards. Yeah, thanks. That was it for me.
Great, thank you very much. If there are any questions, feel free to ask them now in the chat box or just by speaking out. I was wondering if you were able to see a change in behavior, or is this something you could actually see?
I think the numbers of persons who is using this Wadi platform right now is too little to see some changes in behaviors. And of course, we also have to work a little bit more with the code of conduct and where to send people when it peaks in the main season. So right now with this low numbers of persons using it, we can't see that.
Okay, and so you're going to reach out, you continue to reach out with on the ferries, I suppose, and via social media. Are there other ways of trying to reach other groups?
We have to actually activate the tourist organizations and all our partners in the area, summer house rentals and hotels and so on. It has to be a everyday part of how to communicate with the guests in the area.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So I see that there are no other questions, but you gave your information at the beginning. So if someone was a bit shy or questions come up a bit later on, I would redirect them to that. Thank you very much. I think you're going to leave. So also thank you for taking the time today to discuss this very interesting case study.
You're welcome.
So next up, we have Jörn Basel, who is going to discuss the topic More Than Just a Nudge, Customer-Centered Promotion of Sustainable Mobility Behavior in Outdoor Tourism. I'll leave you the floor. If you don't, like, now we had some problems with trying to give control. If you want, you can also just tell us to change the slide.
Yeah, hello everybody. Good morning from rainy Switzerland. My name is Jan Basel. I'm a professor for business psychology at Lucerne University of Applied Sciences. And I have the pleasure to talk to you a little bit about basically two projects we did concerning nudging in outdoor tourism. And I think I requested remote control, so let's see if it works. Otherwise, I just say skip to the next slide, as it was done in the previous talk. So, hopefully it should work out. My keyboard, apparently it should work. Yeah, great. So basically, what was the starting point of our whole nudging journey? Basically, it was the so-called attitude behavior gap. So this paradox between saying and doing. So as you probably know, there's a large gap, not only related to sustainability decisions, but also like basically to our lifestyle in general. There's a certain gap between declared concern, for instance, for the environment on the one hand, and actual consumer behavior on the other hand. So it's called value action gap and so on. And most of the time, everybody knows what's right and what's good. And usually, if they are asked, what do you think is the right decision, people give a certain answer. However, the behavior is not in line with this kind of statement. So now, it should switch here. And why is that important for the sustainability debate? It's quite obvious. So we can assume most of the people have certain knowledge about what kind of decisions are more sustainable than others. Usually, we can assume that there's some sort of positive attitude towards sustainable behavior. I mean, at least most people will not openly admit that they don't care about the environment at all. Frequently, also, we see a certain intention that people say, yeah, I'm really trying really hard to behave in a more sustainable way. However, when it comes to the actual behavior, we see this certain gap. One typical observation, for instance, is here that, for instance, around 90% of Germans consider renewable energy as important. Only around 80% use green electricity. So this is like just a little impression how large this gap actually is. So like declared intention and the actual behavior. And this also holds to be true for outdoor tourism. So what do we see here, however, is that the effectiveness of certain measures to close this gap maybe depend on the right target group. And this is probably in line with the mixed findings we have on addressing this issue. Like, for instance, 75% of a study by Roman et al. Show a fundamentally increased willingness to pay for a more sustainable travel experience. On the other hand, only 5 to 10% of respondents would be willing to pay even a moderate sustainability surcharge. So basically, people declare that, yeah, if it costs a little bit more, I'm fine with that. And when it actually costs a little bit more, people say, nah, I'm traveling somewhere else, or I'm staying in another place, and so on. So another study found that also like a high level of so-called sustainable intelligence is willing to pay more. So like here we see some hints that, okay, we have some personal requirements, some certain knowledge factors that influence actually your behavior or your willingness to close this action intention gap. However, on the other hand, we see only a small percentage of customers, for instance, use this voluntary CO2 compensation payments that most airlines typically offer for various reasons. So we have mixed findings here that intentions are usually quite large, but if you dig a little bit deeper, we somehow got the impression that it has something to do with previous knowledge and with certain target group are basically more willing to close this gap than others. So I keep it short here. What is nudging us all about? Everyone probably here in the meeting knows that nudges are one, but not the only feature of design element of the so-called choice architecture. We change a decision environment in a systematic way, and by definition, we are not restricting the freedom of choice and usually avoid purely monetary incentives. In reality, we see there's usually always some sort of incentive, however, involved. It's rarely pure nudge in the definitionary sense of Thaler and Sunstein. So is it moving forward? Yes. So what's the working mechanism, especially in outdoor tourism? The key mechanisms are on the one hand, social influence, as we can see here, nice study by CPRA International. that in the Provence had the issue that tourists were walking over these fields, and the farmers had a hard time like earning their harvest afterwards. So they set up like posters of the actual farmer saying, basically, I'm Jean-Paul or whatever the name of this farmer is, and that I work here. Please respect my private ground. Don't walk on these fields, even if you want to have some very Instagrammable pictures. So they make this social influence more salient. Of course, in tourism, what's very prominent is the use of defaults. Like with smart meters, people can adapt a little bit the temperature in the hotel room, because frequently people stick to a certain default, and if we make it slightly colder or we keep the air conditioning switched off, people stick to the status quo. What also works in tourism, in many ways, is certain sorts of framing. Here, in terms of food choice, you can nudge a more sustainable food choice by sticking to a traffic light labeling. However, it's only working if you really have a proper traffic light, not only a green or red logo. So here we found a recent study by Slapo et al. That you have to have this traffic light. So this works well, but also one key principle is usually important for having an efficient nudge, that keep it convenient, keep it simple. One example here is that Google offers, I don't know if it's still as a default, but at least it offers you a fuel efficient road if you want to drive in a more eco-friendly way from A to B. So what makes nudging so appealing for many destinations, and why we had requests for many destinations? Basically because it's a little bit like a silver bullet. So it's enforcing sustainable behavior, but while maintaining a positive image and decision-making autonomy. So most destinations we work together say, we don't have any bans. Like, we don't want to put up signs, like as we see here on the left side, like cycling not allowed, don't walk over here, don't do this, do that. This is associated with a negative image. They want to have a positive, freestyle, open, hip image, and this is usually not associated with any sort of bans. So nudging is very appealing to them, because basically say, you just set up certain signs and basically help your visitors that they can act in their own interest. So this is basically a good selling point if you're a researcher and if you approach a destination, you can tell them, look, we have a certain strategy, and this is not annoying your customers, your visitors, and in fact still helps you achieving your sustainable goals. So, but our core idea was that the heterogeneity of the findings on nudging studies shows that a less generalized approach should be taken here, that the focus should be more on the preferences and means of a specific target group. So why was it the case? Because we felt that many nudging approaches work out, but they work out for a group that is already quite environmental conscious. So you're a little bit preaching to the converted here. So you put up a nudge, and then those people say, oh, look, those people opt for the more sustainable option. They leave the air condition off and so on, but those people would have done it anyway. So you're not addressing the right group, because you want to address this group that is about as close as they can get to close this action intention gap. And therefore we found we have to focus on this particular group and not to generalize a nudging approach. Because we also learned this the hard way. We did a study back in 2022 with the destination Engelberg and Protect Our Winters, which is a global NGO. And here we found the intention and behavior gap was apparently too big. So what we did here, we were handing out postcards with a certain nudge, for instance, here CO2 saving as a nudge. And we were handing out those postcards at the parking lot of the destination. So basically, we really wanted that people who came once with the car, and when they come the next time, they should take the public transport. And we gave them a little nudge, but also additionally an incentive, but not that high. I think it was around 10 to 20 Swiss francs, which is equivalent to 10 to 20 euros. So not a pure nudge in the definitory sense. So drivers could redeem this for an attractive voucher and the next visit, provided they had traveled by train. However, it turned out not so many drivers took up this chance and come by train. So we didn't find a significant effect here. However, what we did found that drivers were very interested in participating in a gamble where they could win some free lift tickets and so on, independent if they came by private car or by train. So for some reason we said, okay, that would be the best target group. Of course, we don't want to preach to those who already came by train. We said, okay, we're going to speak directly to those who came by car. But unfortunately, for some reasons, those people were not willing to change their behavior, or it was not attractive enough. But for some reason, it did not work out. So in the study we are conducting now, we said, okay, we have to focus on a clear target group that basically, really is willing to change their behavior. So we developed certain principles for this so-called target nudging approach. So first thing, social influence, we have to identify the relevant comparison group, and we have to address the target group directly. We set certain defaults in the way that we know the preferences of our target group. Also in the sense that we should avoid dark nudges. So like we should really use a nudge in the positive sense that we help people, in terms of their own interest. So we also want to know better the values of the target group so we can directly mention those values. And of course, simplifying convenience, this should be key principle for any sort of nudging intervention. And also, like our previous work showed that basically one single nudge is rarely enough. Like it's not this one single intervention. Usually it comes with a certain package of other communication measures, of other incentives and so on. So it's part of this whole sustainability package. So what we are doing right now in a destination called Arosa, not Arrow, like for some reason I made the screenshot here of our Instagram campaign a little bit too large to highlight it for you. So we were looking for a group that has, on one hand, scores high on the preference, but also has the mean to change their behavior. So like they really have the chance to go to this destination by public transport. And we found out that urban dinks, that is double income, no kids, are very, they have good means to change their behavior, because for large families, it's always difficult to reach a winter destination because they are carrying so much equipment. Also, the urban component is very important because for some reason it should be convenient to reach the public transport to get to Arosa. Like if you live in a more rural area of Switzerland, you maybe have to take first the bus and then to change into train and change another train. Basically, this is for most people considered as too much of a hassle, even though they would say like, I would love to take the public transport, but carrying my ski equipment from A to B is simply too much of a hassle. So we were now figuring out what kind of values and what kind of comparison groups work best for this target group. And for instance, here you see one Instagram campaign that is currently running right now. So we tell them that, for instance, it's more sustainable if you extend, you stay a little bit in Arosa. So if you avoid these peaks a little bit, this over-tourism peaks a little bit. If you extend, you stay a little bit and return on Monday, which is possible if you don't have any family obligations at home. And we highlight this by the value that if you take the weekend off, also the travel home is more relaxed. So like this is German, die Erholung bei der Heimreise nicht verlieren. So don't forget about the relaxation on your way home. So we basically address here the value of the things that basically if you have a weekend off, you should really enjoy it and not ruin the experience by a packed travel back home. So we have various kinds of nudges we are testing here. However, I have to admit that as a dependent variable, we cannot directly track it. So we cannot stand at the train station in Arosa and say, okay, did you see the Instagram campaign? So what is our call for action here? So we have a call for action that people can participate in winning a voucher and so on. So we want to understand if this actually works. So like people get the message and if this is in line with their values. So we are going back in this slide. I was saying in the beginning, so do we really change the attitude? Do we really change the intention to change behavior? So we're approaching the value behavior gap this way. So because we assume we will reach certain people and it's part of the communication campaign, but we are also aware this will not have effect. So it will not change like all the people, all urban dinks out of Southern will go by train. But we feel that we have to address the right people with the right communication campaign, and social media marketing luckily allows this through target marketing that you can really focus on the right target group. And this is also my key learnings, that if we have nudges, we should customize them a little bit towards the right target group. And we know that certain people, basically, they're not willing to change their behavior for various reasons, either because their preferences or because of their means. And we should basically just fill out this little matrix in the beginning and only work with those people who are on the upper right-hand side, like the urban dinks in this case. Okay, to conclude my little talk, so our key learnings, if you want to be a smart choice architect, if you want to use target nudging, we have 4 key principles. Make it easy, remove frictions, change choice environments, so like really focus on people where the change is easy to implement. Make it attractive, always use positive frames, so like here, highlight that, okay, you can have a more relaxed stay and so on. Use smart incentives. Make it social, highlight other people's sustainable behavior. So comparison with the key reference group is quite important. Make it timely, emphasize present benefits. So here usually we highlight the individual benefits. We say, of course, it's good for the environment, but first of all, it's also good for you. You have a relaxed way home. So like this is a present benefit, because we always struggle a bit if you tell people, so yeah, but global warming is progressing in 10, 20, 30 years, we have this effect. This is usually too far for people to imagine. So if we mention a direct effect for themselves, is usually more effective. And yeah, that's about it. In case you want to read more, here's the key literature, and on the slides, which are open to share, funny if you want to share them in the aftermath. You can reach out to me, or also if you have some time, ask me some questions if you have any.
Great, thank you very much. That was very clear and very interesting. Before I start, does someone else have a question?
Yes. Yes, I have a question, Fanny.
Please, Fabio, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Fabio from Brabant Partners. Thank you for the great presentation. In one of your slides, you mentioned know your target group, or you mentioned it several times. I understand that because it makes it really concrete and specific. But are there also any general or universal nudging rules that that you can apply for everybody? Also from an international perspective.
Yeah, I think this slide, like the smart choice architecture, I think I took this from the Behavioral Insights team. They have a nice publication. It's called The Little Book of Green Nudges. I can highly recommend. And I think those principles are valid basically for any sort of behavioral intervention. Like this is basically rooted in the human nature, how we are properly incentivized, so which incentives work, which comparison group work. And yeah, I remember when I started my PhD, I once had a supervisor who told me just always assume people are lazy. So, and somehow this guides a little bit all the interventions. So like make it as easy as possible, make the comparison easy as possible. And especially I like the factor like this, make it timely, like present benefits. I think many sustainable interventions really highlight bad future outcomes for the whole humankind. But I think it's more productive if we focus on positive image and present benefits for the people who actually engage in this behavior. Say like, look, it's more sustainable, but it's also nice. Like, take this food option, for instance, because it's locally produced, it's fresher. Like if you take the whatever Pacific sushi, it's a good menu, but like this one's locally produced, like, and you can see the farmer harvesting it and so on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I also saw that Marco has a question.
Yes, hello, Marco from Polis. You don't see my screen because I'm sharing. You don't see me because I'm sharing. But I just wanted to ask. I mean, you mentioned urban dinks and more responsive groups to nudging in general. But from your experience and research, if we can talk about one category, the most non-responsive, is it the elderly men? And following question is if together with the nature parks or other protected areas, you had any insight on how to reach those, if not through nudges?
Yes, like our insight is based on the first study that did not work out. However, we found that at particular, unfortunately, I have to say, males traveling alone for more rural areas of Switzerland were quite reluctant. They were not even taking the card. So this is based like on observational data, but basically it shows us that some people are super reluctant at all. Like I feel they are highly skeptical when it comes to any sort of sustainability communication. So they feel always, okay, they want to take something away from me. So like if I tell them, hey, look, we have a very convenient way that you come here by train, they feel like, oh, they want to take away my right to go by car. So I think the key factor is here, as soon as people feel like they're losing their freedom in some sense, we get this reactance towards any communication measure. And how can we reach them? Yeah, unfortunately, I think the only way to reach them is with pure monetary incentives or monetary punishments in this case. However, their willingness to pay, for instance, we were also discussing it with one destination, said, okay, should we just increase the parking lot fee? So easiest way, like to punish drivers, or should we give like an incentive for those people who come at least in a car with 4 or 5 people? And the destination said, okay, we could do it, but we don't want to because this is ruining our image. This is again what I was highlighting in the beginning, that most destinations don't like the idea of punishing their visitors with high fees. And also, they don't like the idea. But this group, rural males in expensive cars, were, based on our previous study, the most or the least susceptible to this intervention.
Unfortunately. Thank you very much. There are no other questions as far as I can see. No. Then thank you very much. We will move on to Werner Gronau from the University of Applied Science, Stralsund. And he will talk about encouraging behavior change towards sustainable tourism and like a more German approach to free public transport for tourists. You can choose. We have a 50-50. Either you try to do it from afar and change the slides yourself, or you just scream to Marco. You can choose.
I just tried, so let's wait and see. Okay, welcome everybody. I just want to add before I start to support Jörn, and I'm really happy about this presentation because basically I was so worried that I haven't really addressed now this, let's say, customer perspective, so this demand side, because I'm pretty much focusing on the supply side. So I'm really happy on all the things you said, and I'm 100% supporting it. And maybe just to add, I mean, I did my PhD a long time ago about what was called those days lifestyle mobility groups. And basically the idea was that we clustered groups and tried to figure out to what extent they are willing to take on mobility management measures at tourism destinations, right? So, and basically it's a different topic, but it's the same what you see in nudging, that they are very selective on different types of lifestyle groups, whether they stick to it or not. And we are not just back with a white old man and the luxurious cars, but there's also families and stuff like that. So I think very, very helpful, and also very happy that we addressed this. So yeah, me also being professor, so you also have to have a little bit more, let's say, theoretical content than from the colleague from Denmark before. And I also want to try to make you think a little bit on your everyday decisions, because my experience is that it's always kind of complicated to overcome kind of stereotypes. I mean, I studied transport planning, and there I always learned, for example, there are tourists and there are locals, right? So there we have commuters and we have other people and stuff like that. So I want to question this as a kind of introduction first, and then I want to show you a few examples on product design. I strongly believe in the fact that we can increase the public transport quality and also supply by addressing several target groups, and of course, in this context, talking about tourists as a possible target group. And next step, then talking about tariff. I mean, we talk about product and we can also talk about tariff as a product, but specifically talking about different types of tariffs to support also the utilization of tourists for public transport supply. And in the end, I don't have a conclusion because I had to shorten it, but I want to provide you some kind of general insights, what I think is always important when we address this topic in general. So tourists versus locals. I mean, there's a long debate, as I said. I mean, I also learned in transport planning that basically there are locals, there are commuters, and there are other people and stuff like that. At the same time, when we think about the development we saw in research, also in sociology in recent years, that we have this multi-optional consumers, we have multi-local people, we have long-term stays, we have digital nomads, all those kind of things. We also saw that tourists more and more are also conscious on the situation their destinations are in Germany, for example, on a small island on the North Sea. They collected money basically from loyal customers to protect their island from storms and climate change measures. So they didn't get anything. They were just asked to pay to save the destination. On the one hand, to save the destination for the locals, but also to save the destinations that they can visit it in future. So I think sometimes we have to question whether our traditional ideas of always splitting out demand in so many different types is really helpful in making a change. So that's basically something I want to make you think about at this point. And also, I mean, when we travel back in time a little bit, we saw that transport integration has taken place in various ways. So, I mean, very simple example, we talked about the spatial integration and we talked about stakeholder integration in the past. What do I mean? Basically, we can say we introduced a lot of different products, kind of summing up different options, products in a spatial integration. So what I put here, for example, public transport on a local level, so on a community level, maybe on a national level, or even on a European Union level. So this means one transport mode basically over several spatial contexts. Or we work the other way around, basically, in terms of we integrate lots of different stakeholders on the same spatial level, right? So public transport, then additional leisure sites, think about some city cards and stuff like that, or even going beyond the idea that it's not just public transport and leisure sites, but maybe even additional transport providers. So very brief, a few examples. I mean, just to illustrate this, I hope or I think that everybody is kind of familiar with them. So, for example, when we talk about public transport on a national level, I think the Generalabo in Switzerland is a good option. In Germany, we also now have the Deutschland card, more or less similar, but only focusing on the regional transport. And what I want to ask you, is this a tourism product or is it a transport product? And basically, my understanding is that it's not relevant what it's designed for, but it's relevant how people use it. And I think that comes back to our constant blurring of demand and demand structures. Same when we talk about this integrated level on a EU level. The Interrail ticket, maybe some of you traveled in the past with it, is also an extreme example because it was thought to be a transport product, but basically, okay, it's always a little bit slow on moving, but okay. But in the end, it's mainly used as a tourism product, basically, right? People travel all through Europe doing basically urban tourism, visiting as many large urban cities in Europe in 4 weeks as possible. So again, same question. And last but not least, just to illustrate this whole debate, then what maybe is the first thing people think about is all those city cards, urban tourism, Amsterdam city card, Berlin welcome card and stuff, where we have on a local level this combination of public transport supply and additional tourism sites. Again, I mean, I think here everybody would say basically it's a tourism product, but of course it's also a transport product to a certain extent. So this means what I wanted to outline with this, we tend to study still, I mean, that's why I put it there. We have studies on public transport customer satisfaction, and we have studies on tourist satisfaction with public transport, and there are differences, I agree, but I'm not really sure whether it's because it's different people, but maybe it's because they're acting in a different context. So different people or different attitudes of the same people. And I think in today's times, we can pretty much say that it's basically people behave different in the leisure and tourism context than they believe in the everyday context, right? So again, question is, do we address to different people? No, in the end, we address to same people, but with different attitudes in the different contexts. And therefore, I also want to raise the question, which is basically you as practitioners, you have to decide where we want to integrate, yeah, or what level of integration we want to reach, which one makes sense for us. Okay, so as I said, just some food for thoughts. Now, some kind of practical examples. What I guess everybody is kind of familiar with is this issue, what we always discuss. Okay, we have a low level of public transport supply, and it means it's an unattractive supply, means low user numbers, means low economic feasibility, means we're reducing supply, right? So this typical vicious circle. To overcome this, very simple. I mean, it's not rocket science at all. Say, okay, guys, in case we can get additional target groups, additional demand, we can increase the user number. By doing so, we can increase the economic feasibility, and by doing so, we can upgrade the product, and therefore, again, there's new target groups. Now, okay, this sounds pretty easy in theory, and worst case scenario, you do all this, but then afterwards you don't spend the money you earn on the system again, which we also see quite often. But in principle, I think this might be an option how we can also support public transport supply and also make it more attractive, because it's one thing to convince people to use it, but if it's not attractive, then it's pretty hard to convince them. So we have to work both ways. If you convince people by nudging to get into a bus which is then not arriving or which is fully packed, they will never try it again. So I think it has to work both ways. I agree, in Switzerland, maybe where you have a high level of public transport supply, it's easier to get them in, but Germany in many, especially rural areas, has a big issue. That's why that it's working. I want to show you with a short example. It's basically based on a research project funded by the German Ministry of Research some time ago on rural transport in improving rural transport conditions. And again, we didn't start off from the tourism context. We're talking about a small region in North Rhine-Westphalia. Yeah, I mean, we can always discuss what is rural. North Rhine-Westphalia has different ideas what is rural. I think we have much more rural regions somewhere in Europe, but that's why I indicated you those numbers, that you know what we're talking. And the situation was that they had a regional coach line, which basically was kind of decent during the weeks, but on the weekend there was basically no demand, and there was a threat that this is going to be closed. And then the question was, how can we make sure that this regional bus line is still existing in this context? And so we stick to what I just showed you. I tried to get rid of this vicious circle, and we said, okay, I mean, this bus line passes by several touristic sites on the way. I mean, it doesn't really stop and doesn't really get exactly there, but this might be an option. And we did an evaluation and find out, okay, for many people who use the bus, it's not so relevant whether it's 5 minutes more or less, but that there is a decent service, and the service also exists, for example, on the weekends, to give them the opportunity to move where they want to move. So the idea was basically that we said, okay, instead of having just the local transport, public transport, a commuter transport more or less, we turn it into a tourism product. How did we do this? We added a few stops along the line, and the main point, we had a new marketing approach. So the good old regional bus ended up in this lovely green, was relabeled to a so-called Naturpark bus, and a new tariff system was introduced. I mean, this wasn't an issue for the locals because they didn't bother whether it's called a regional bus or Naturpark bus or whatever, but it made a difference to the tourists because this created awareness. Just the fact that they saw the bus, that they are familiar with this term, they've kind of felt addressed. And this was just a pilot basically during the summer season on an hourly base, because it was funded by the ministry. That's why there was the pilot. And just very briefly, but just a few sites along this line, which are then basically all included. There's an open air museum. There's Exensteine, which is basically a natural site. There's a small lake, and so on and so on. So what was the result of the whole thing? Yeah, we basically doubled the number of users, which is, I think, a clear message. So basically, we added the same amount of users, but this were then basically tourists. Besides the fact that we were able to increase the number of users, we heavily increased also the revenue due to the fact that the tourists use different tickets than the locals use, right? They have their seasonal tickets, where there's not much spending. On the other hand, the tourists bought their specific tourist tickets or even single tickets, which made a huge difference on the income level of the line. So basically, in the end, they even ended up not with profits, but at least with a black or red, whatever you want to call it, zero. Something we didn't even expect. We just wanted to create a certain support. And besides this fact, there was even another fact, because due to this very positive result in the first year, we had some money to run this for almost another season. And at the end of the second season, we were asking people, visitors of the different sites, okay, had this any impact? And they said, yeah, last time we came and we saw the bus, and this time we tried to, yeah, whether it's working or not, right? So we even saw a change in modal split after basically already, or in the second year already. And now we are coming to what I addressed before, in terms of, if you want to be successful, we have to reinvest. And that's exactly what they did. So they increased their economic visibility, they put this additional effort, and they reinvested. So how did they reinvest? They enlarged the line, they put it, they added a few additional attractions. They also upgraded the system by adding, for example, bicycle trailers, and with it they came with a marketing campaign to address, especially to cycle associations and so on, to say, okay guys, we have this, we have a good product, and that's perfect. They published it in the newsletters and stuff like that. So they had a clear idea how we want to evolve and whom to address. And again, by doing so, they further increased the number of visitors, the number of users. They bought even new buses, larger capacities, and they also included several additional regional bus lines into the system. So basically what they did, they kind of turned a regional bus system into a kind of tourism network. I mean, they still serving locals, but they clearly address to tourists and excursionists as a target group. Just one example, providing more or less evidence on what I tried to convince you in the beginning, that we can combine different demands and being successful. What lessons learned can we take from this? I mean, okay, we can think about additional funding, for example, through research projects, but also thinking about new target groups. And marketing, especially target group orientated marketing, is an issue. They also invested in constantly improving the quality level. So they never stopped. They always tried, okay, we can say 24-hour frequency is also a regular service. But they said, okay, we also want to increase the quality from a 2-hour service to a 1-hour service, and even then to a 30-minute service at a certain point. And what they always did, they always worked a lot on political lobbying, because basically if you need money, you also have to get it from the politicians. And these are all things which I think are quite often neglected. So besides this idea of really product design and product development, we can also think about tariffs and how this works. I mean, I think most of you might be familiar with this idea of guest pass, guest ticket, or in German, Gäste-Ticket. Yeah, so this idea that basically overnight tourists are allowed free public transport in the destination they stay in for the period of time. Introduced by several destinations in German-speaking countries. Maybe the first ones, most famous one is maybe Kuno, so the Black Forest, which also covers a huge area in today's times. The system, the financing is relatively easy. Basically, for each tourist, the public transport suppliers get in the beginning 35 cents, at the moment 50 cents. And tourists are eligible to free public transport supply. And this has been copied in several low mountain regions in Germany, and in some of them it has been that successful that they are now even discussing of closing it down, because they have to increase capacities, which means more investment, which is no one willing to do. So that's the other side of the medal. If you're successful, then in the end you might be too successful, and you might ask too much money for further increase of the service. How successful this is and how this can be further developed, I want to illustrate with what South Tyrol has implemented in recent years, because they said for the whole region, autonomous region of South Tyrol, we introduce a mobility service, so basically a guest ticket, guest pass. All tourists are eligible, all the overnight tourists, but we add value. So we say, okay, we have a regional part, so regional tourism associations can have a theme package. So this means, I don't know, spa tourism, skiing, or whatever, depending on the specific region. They can add such services, and in the end, also you as an individual, you can add also, I don't know, special services you can purchase. So basically, they start off from the mobility, but they integrate all the tourism products and individualize them for an individual service with their mobility card, which I still show you the kind of paper version of it, which today has then become a more digital one and also integrated into an app. Financing, basically the same, what we saw before in Germany, that basically all the overnight tourists, they have, or I mean, it's paid. I don't want to go in all the details who's paying. Sometimes they introduce a tourism tax. Sometimes it's the communities to pay, but it's we could spend hours on the different issues. But there you also see that in the end, we talk about amount of less than €1 in all of the cases, and I think this is a very valuable thing, and this also changes the whole situation of public transport, because we get another pillar of financing public transport. So far it was basically pupils in the rural areas. Now we have tourists, so this means most probably most of the public transport suppliers will orientate in future more towards the interest of tourists, because they're a financial pillar of their supply. And to add, basically the next dimension, what also comes with this issue of digitalization, I, I just illustrated this with this the good old paper card. Then we had this kind of paper card with a magnetic system, which means the first advancement. Then we talked about the digital pass, and now we're talking about apps. That in the past we also had this issue. Those guest cards were issued once you are in the destination. So for traveling to the destination, they were not basically valid, because you just get it in there. If you have a digital one, if you can download it, you can also use this for the travel to the destination, which also gives you new opportunities, right? And instead of just intra destination accessibility, you also can use it for traveling to the destination. Not addressing now all these options you have with the digitalization in terms of demand numbers, orientations, behavior, all those kind of things can be tracked basically, which then also means we have a much better understanding what they do, how can, for example, which of the target groups might be helpful to combine with other demands, where we see kind of overlay of demand, and so on and so on. So there are lots of opportunities with those kind of things as well. So outlook, rather brief. As I said, I don't want to sum up what I said. You can still take a look at it, but maybe more some kind of general statements. From my experience of almost 25 years in the context, is that what is needed is a charismatic person who really drives such projects forward. We did a study on the guest ticket destinations in Germany, and basically most of them are scared of the situation when the responsible officer person goes into retirement, because they said, okay, basically what we offer, all this attitudes, all the convincing of stakeholders is related to one single person. If this person goes, we don't know whether we will be successful in the future. And I think this is kind of scary. So in many cases, we present all of those best practices, but in many cases, they're related to one single person and to the existence of one single person. Also, I mean, commitment of all stakeholders, also financial, because I mean, typical situations, if you address to transport stakeholders and tourism stakeholders, there's always this issue. Yeah, tourism stakeholders are keen on free public transport supply for tourists, but they are not willing to pay. So we have this kind of strange attitude that we have a lot of moderated planning processes where we try to get together a lot of different stakeholders, but in the end they all have comments, but they don't have their financial commitment to the issue. And next point, we are back with political lobbying, what I also mentioned before, financial support beyond 1 year, right? So we always have this typical thing, we have a 3-year project or a 1 or 2 year pilot study. In the tourism context, we know that people don't get used to something within 1 or 2 times they use it. And the problem is commuters travel a certain trip on a daily basis. So therefore, after 6 months, they have done this several times. In the tourism context, worst case scenario, they come back in 1 year, right? So this is also something which has to be considered. So we cannot be successful within just 1 year or maybe 2 years. Patience amongst political decision makers is therefore crucial. If you're able to get this all together, then you're really a champion, because then you make it work. And that this is possible, I wanted to illustrate with a short example from the Lippe district in Northern Westphalia, because over a time horizon of more than 25 years, they constantly upgraded their system. They included new services, they increased their economic feasibility. Again, this is one single person which basically allocates his own whole life on making things better, but it's working, but under a lot of different and complicated circumstances. So I hope I wasn't too negative, but created some awareness, and I'm open for question. And of course, there's lots of also literature or whatever, feel free to ask, and we can add some more stuff.
Great, thank you very much. Especially the example of this tourist bus is very interesting for Mona, because it's a lot in like in areas where there are a lot of commuters. So there is actually the infrastructure, but it's not used during the weekends. So I think this is something we'll look into. Are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. Feel free.
I
Yes.
don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Maybe for both speakers, all the speakers that are still here with us, how do you measure the impacts of the projects that you've been developing?
So perhaps we can start with Werner.
Yeah, I mean, what I included in the presentation already, I mean, the goal was to create economic feasibility. So we wanted to keep this line, for example, alive, and this meant we have to reduce the deficit. So we decrease the deficit, and in the end, I mean, it's now complicated in Germany. Public transport is not supposed to make profits. So the goal is to achieve 0, and that's what we did. And that was also what the evaluation showed.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps Jörn wants to add something.
Thank you. I'm fine. I didn't raise my hand.
Okay.
Thanks.
Marco has still a question, perhaps quickly, because yeah, we're a bit late in time, but I think we can still squeeze a question in.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very quick one. You talked about the integration of cards. You talked about charismatic people and decision makers. And in Mona project, I often see with our partners that when introducing some of the, I don't know, travel cards or award system, that it needs to be also established on some regional or national level, and the cooperation there lacks. So do you have any, I mean, advice, suggestion or experience from your side on how to do that, Werner?
Yeah, I mean, for example, some of the federal states in Germany have now decided that leisure and tourism is an integral part of transport planning. So what we call regional transport planning, that some federal states have said, okay, tourism and leisure is something which has to be part of a transport planning. So beyond this idea of just commuters and stuff like that, so this means they create pressure on a higher political level. In the end, then this gives stakeholders on a local and community level and regional level more power to address this issue, because then you have it from top down and you have it from bottom up. And so just the fact that there is a discussion that leisure and tourism transport should be an issue for regional transport planning in general, helps basically, right? So I mean, this might be the one example, one recommendation we could go for.
Great, thank you. So then we'll move on. well, I'm a bit afraid to say the last word, last name, so I'll just say Ollie, to talk about nudging towards sustainable mobility behavior in urban nature destinations. So something that is very close also to the Mona project in Finland.
So do you have my slides there or?
Yes, either you can request to remote control, or you could just tell us when to move forward as you like.
Okay, how can I get the remote control?
So at Marco's, you see Polly's screen on top, and you can click on the three dots and go on request remote control.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you prefer, you can also share your screen.
I don't find actually but anyway.
Yeah, we can also do it.
Yeah, let's go so that I tell when to change the slides.
Okay, let's do it that way.
So I'm Olli Pihlema, working in VTT Technical Research Center of Finland as a senior scientist and working on digital solutions promoting sustainable mobility choices. And I will tell you about an experiment which is made actually many years ago, but is very relevant still. And it is the context is the very popular nature destination in Finland. And that was one of the many small experiments proposing concrete ways to achieve more sustainable mobility behavior among the people in Finland. And in our case, the target group was people going to the very popular nature destination, which is near Helsinki region, the metropolitan area of Finland. And when people go to these kind of places in the national parks, they are looking for such a view and mindset that you have here in the picture. But the reality, like the next one, is in a popular places very often like this. There's a crowded places, cars trying to find the parking place, and the very popular places, they tend to be such that when people doesn't get their cars in the official parking places, they do illegal parking and such. The next one. So the area where we had that experiment is the Nuuksio National Park, which is surrounded by 1.5 million inhabitants in Finland. So it's the breathing space for these people living here in the metropolitan or Helsinki region. And it's only less than 30 kilometers from Helsinki. And the yearly visitor count is about 3,500 visitors there. So it's the second most popular national park in Finland. We have nowadays 41 or 42 national parks in Finland. And this is really something which is used mostly by the local people coming from the Helsinki region. They come there for the peace of mind. They come there picking berries, mushrooms, and so on, or have sport activities and so on. But the idea is for the manager of the national parks that there will be more and more also touristic activities there. Next one. So the problem is that vast majority of the visits are made by private cars, and there is a limited amount of parking places and place for cars. So that having the private cars going there is of course an unsustainable impact for the nature. Also this fact that people come by the private cars, places where all the destinations are more or less dead-end roads, small roads, where there are in the end of the roads, there are those parking places. There are very dangerous situations while people are walking also those roads. And the other problem is that sufficient public transportation is not easy to actually provide there because of the small roads. And another thing for the public transportation is that profitable reservoir public transportation is difficult to arrange because it is not known when the people come, because it's so much dependent on the weather, for example. Next one. So we thought that it is there are typically two ways to restrict or guide people in this kind of situation. One is to restrict the doings there, having big fees for parking and make some kind of alterations of the roads such that driving there is slower than not so easy, and so on. And there are carrots to having more appealing alternatives for moving there. Like the next one. I don't know why the slides actually looks very different in this Google system, but whatever. We actually thought that we try to keep people as sensible, rational beings, and by conveying them the real situation in a real time from the national park would actually guide them in the best way. So we thought that if they see the parking lots actually that they are full, maybe they like to change their behavior and go to the other parking places or find some other way to come to the national park. And that was the basic idea where we started to implement there in our experiment. Next one. So we set up field stations having monitoring cameras there actually. And that wasn't easy thing because there were no actual technical infrastructure in the national park, no internet connection, no power lines, no nothing. We had to do actually standalone field units there, which we built from the beginning. And I can say that there are no optimized systems for this kind of field units actually available. So that was a really challenge. But the idea was that we have those field units there having a camera, and they send every 5 minutes they send the situation, one still shot from the parking lot to the central server where the images were processed so that they can every privacy concern have been removed there, and then we distributed these pictures to our open API so that our application can show the situation in the parking places, but also so that any other application wanting to use this information can use this information. Next one. So we placed these field stations or units in 5 different parking lots in Nuuksio, to those ones which are very often full, actually. There are about 26 or more parking places in the Nuuksio National Park, but these were some of the most popular ones. Next one. So the idea was that people can go to the web application and see the parking lot situation there by selecting the parking lot where they are willing to go. So next. So the idea was if the parking lot is full, next, they get an alternative. Maybe there are buses going into the same place where they are going, or they can go to the other place. We have wanted to show everything which is available in a national park, the hiking routes and so that people can change their mind and go to the other place if the one parking lot they are choosing is actually full. And so with our application, they could see the situation in different parking lots and select the one which was not full, or to get the timetables for the buses and so on. The next one. So in the first year we had this experiment, we noticed that, okay, we had the 20,000 visits only during the autumn in September and November, which were actually very peak visiting times there. And we saw that people actually started to use our application, and we gained stable user base for the application. And of course, when we had the visibility campaigns for the application, and when there were weekends and other peak times for the visiting, people actually use that more. And 57% of the users were mobile users, which shows that people also use the desktop to see the situation already before they started their visit to the nature. Next one. We also made in next year machine vision upgrade, so that your next one, so that we instead of showing only the pictures from the parking lots, we also counted them automatically to have that kind of traffic light like signals in the map, so that people can see the situation in all the parking lots in the same time very easily. Next one. And this machine vision system was actually, maybe the previous one, was actually quite good. You can see here that the actual manual count of the cars is marked by the gray line here, and the machine vision count is here by the yellow line. So the machine vision count, despite of very big challenges, actually, we had only one low resolution camera for big parking places, and still they could count very well when we fine-tuned the algorithm a little. And we had to do that for each parking place separately. But we got very good results, so that we can do that also automatically, not giving the pictures out from the parking lots. The next one. We made a short questionnaire about the application, in the application the people used actually, and we get very good response for the service. Next one. Actually, all the users who tried or used the Parkkihaukka or Parkhawk or Parking Hawk application were very satisfied about the application and wanted to use it all the time when they come to the national park. Next one. They had also textual freeform feedback, and they also said that they were highly appreciated the application, and wanted to actually this service to expand to the other parking lots, because being in only 5 parking lots from the 26 ones didn't give enough information for the people to make a selection to other parking places. So they also suggested that we should increase the marking efforts for this application, because already our users knew that almost or the big majority didn't know about the service. And that was because pretty much people came into the national park once in a year or even rarer. So the application was quite new, because people didn't come there many times a year. But those who actually adopted the application to the use, they stayed as a user. So another problem was that we had problems because of the challenging conditions there and the field unit challenges. We had some downtimes there, and people were very concerned that now it's not working. And actually, it wasn't in a way negative feedback, but we thought it is actually positive feedback. People really wanted to see the situation. They really wanted to have the application working. And there were only very little feedback on the Big Brother concerns. Some people said that, but only a little one. A little feedback come from that. Vice versa, people thought that it can actually increase safety in those parking lots when there are cameras. Next one. We had also an interviews in the parking lots, on-site interviews for those people who didn't use the application, because we learned that about 90% of the people didn't knew about the application. Next one. So the respondents of the interview came from major in most times from Helsinki, city of Helsinki. And that was the case also when we see the internet logs, the people accessing our application, they came from Finland mainly, I mean, from Helsinki mainly. So the problem was that really what I said, that from 79 interviews, only 5 used Parkkihaukka or have used when they came to the national park. 12 were aware of Parkkihaukka and 74 didn't know about Parkkihaukka at all. So the marketing here also came the major thing we should do more. Next one. Those who actually didn't use Parkkihaukka, wasn't aware of Parkkihaukka, we asked them if we introduced the Parkkihaukka service for them on site and showed them what kind of application it is. And after introduction, they answered our questions, and we asked, for example, if those people would change their parking behavior or mobility behavior if they had known that the parking lot is full. 3/4 of people said that of course they would change their behavior. Most of the people saw that this kind of service is really necessary when they learned that this kind of service is available. And 70% of the people said that they start actually using this kind of service when they now know about it. The next one. So next one. The conclusions from our services. First, I can say that we had the 2 experiment years there, and it was working only from the springtime to the autumn time. In the winter time, it was too difficult to have because there was not too much light there, so the solar power wasn't working then. So we had those 2 years of experiments, and then the manager of the national parks, the Nuuksion National Park, actually bought the service for the next 2 years from us. So they were convinced that this is a good service. And we discontinued the service because we noticed that we must renew the whole field units there after, because in the small experiments we had the very cheap infrastructure there, and the system would have to be renewed, and also research organization wasn't very good host for this kind of service, because we didn't have time to have a 24/7 maintenance for that. So the problem is that the parking problems remains there, and this kind of service is still very required and desired in these places. The next one. So what we learned, these kind of systems in the real wilderness, believe it or not, we have it near the metropolitan area in Helsinki. We don't have very good connectivity there or mobile connectivity there. There is no power. We had to actually build ourselves a weather and vandalism-proof solution there and so on. GDPR challenges are nowadays even more strict than were those times we tried these things. And having a camera-based surveillance is not easy to develop and use there. And the other thing is that we should have a service that is on or active 24/7 there, because people are complaining very quickly when the service is not working correctly. The next one. And another thing was that if we have only partial coverage that we had in a small experiment which we had, it's not enough to solve the problem. It can give an indication if this is a good solution or not, but it can't solve the problem or nudge the people good enough, because they don't have the knowledge about the other alternatives. If they have only some alternatives available, it's not good. They should have more alternatives. And another thing was that the reaching user base is difficult when most visitors are only occasional, coming once in a year or something like that. So we have to add marketing channels. Another thing which we thought is that in the main roads coming into the national park, we should have a digital signage there, digital displays showing the situation in a parking lot, so that they can, when coming there, actually change their mind before coming to the parking place, even if they are not knowing about the mobile service. But also advertise in those same displays that there is mobile service available. Okay, the final conclusion is that we had very successful results about nudging people. People were really satisfied for this kind of service, where the real information which can be trusted was used to nudge people to other places from those crowded places. But of course, the main income was also that the impact depends. The overall impact depends on the proportion of the visitors getting the message. So we must reach more people than we did now. Next. So I want to thank you for your attendance, and I'm ready for the questions. I saw that there might have been some in the chat.
Yes, perfect. So there's first question by Lisbeth about the question, like, is the fact of having to download a specific app an extra barrier? So you think that might have been also an issue for some people to access it?
It was a web application. It's just a web address. No need actually to download an application. So, and it was also such an application that could adapt itself to the big displays and also for the mobile displays.
Okay, great. Thank you. And from Natalie also, what marketing efforts did you use to raise awareness about the existence of this service? And did you collaborate with local tourism agencies?
Yes, we cooperated with the Business Espoo, which was a local, or Visit Espoo, actually, which is a local tourist organization. We worked with the Metsähallitus, who is managing the national park. They put that information about the application to their official channels, to the paper car maps they shared in National Park Center, and also they put the marketing information to the social media, and we had also a video in which was shared in YouTube and social media having this kind of application.
Okay, great, thank you. I have also a last question. Are there any plans to recreate a similar service? Because it seemed quite successful, so it's a bit of a pity that it's not the case anymore.
Not such a service, but we utilize our experience from that, and we are still working for similar kinds of systems where we try to have the sustainable modal shift for people's mobility behavior. But this is something we cannot actually do as a research organization. We wanted to have this as an experiment, but we want that we could transfer this service and to some real organization, real company doing this.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, it's also a question of time. This is why I will ask Nina to start with our first presentation about Mona and what we are doing in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. And short question, Fanny, do we have 5 minutes to go beyond 11:45 in webinar, or we need to end it sharp because...
For the other, I think we'll try. I think I'll cut most of my... Okay, you try to finish and take your time, and I will try to take the rest from my time.
Okay, good. So indeed, if you can change slides for me, that would be perfect. So my name is Nina Nesterova. I'm Professor of Sustainable Tourism and Transport at Breda University of Applied Sciences, and we are one of the Mona research partners. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that my presentation summarizes main outcomes of the literature review that we performed for the Mona project with a group of colleagues from Breda University and Catholic University Leuven. And the review is really organized around theoretical foundations and case studies, zooming into specific interventions for the sustainable mobility to and within nature areas. So our focus is really sustainable mobility to nature areas. And nudging is one of the intervention categories that we were focusing in this report. So indeed, on the slide that you really see now, you can see that understanding why people visit nature areas help in designing nudging techniques that promote sustainable behaviors. So research on travel motivation dates back to the late 1970s, and since then it is consistently explored why people travel to nature areas, what their values are, and what activities they perform in nature areas. And we can see that visitors can generally be grouped into 4 main categories based on their motivations. So some are drawn to nature to experience the beauty and uniqueness of natural landscapes, so focusing really on appreciation and immersion to their environment. Another group is motivated by sports and adventure, engaging in physical activities that provide challenge and satisfaction to them. Some visitors are driven by relaxation and leisure, using nature as an escape from daily routines. And lastly, people come to nature for conservation purposes, so really valuing environmental protection and sustainability. So these motivations, they really influence the type of activities visitors engage when in nature and how they interact with nature areas. And recognizing these differences, different drivers, allows for the development of nudging techniques that has more impactful influence on visitor expectations. So on the next slide, you can really see, I think you need to push through now. Yes, it did. So in the next slide, you can see a set that visitor motivations have important because they influence behavior in nature areas. For example, research shows that place attachment plays a crucial role in shaping visitor behavior. For example, emotional bonds with specific location encourage repeat visits and really foster a sense of responsibility towards preservation of this specific nature area. So it means that visitors who feel connected to a place, they are more likely to support environmental initiatives and are more receptive to respective to the green nudges that we can develop. Similarly, place dependence also refers to how visitors perceive the uniqueness of a location in fulfilling their recreational needs. So those who rely on a specific nature area for their leisure experiences are more inclined to protect it, as their ability to enjoy the space depends on its preservation. Then we also saw that pro-environmental values of visitors influence travel motivations, and as told, some visitors prioritize conservation, and they really integrate this environmental responsibility into their travel decisions, while others really balance nature appreciation with other more important for them leisure motives. And actually, really, research shows that those motivated by novelty and recreation tend to show a stronger environmental concerns, whereas visitors just seeking escape from their daily routine, daily environment, they often show lower levels of engagement with sustainability. And lastly, also in our literature review, we mentioned push-pull model, which also give another perspective on how motivations shape visitor behavior at nature, because some travelers are drawn to nature as a primary source of attraction. So then nature is really the pull factor for different nudges we can think about, while others use it as a setting to fulfill other personal needs. So these different visitors respond to nudges differently, and it's really essential to understand these distinctions for more effective tourism nudges. So on the next slide, you can see that at this webinar, we are specifically zooming into nudging for sustainable mobility behavior to nature areas. So that is why also the determinants of the visitors' mobility behavior is really the next parameter which is important to consider while developing effective nudges. And of course, mobility behavior, like really the decisions that individuals make regarding their trips, and which are influenced by a wide range of factors. And for nudges, we really saw that two groups of factors are the most important, and those are objective factors, which really refer to more tangible elements that define available travel options, such as, for example, the availability of sustainable transport modes to nature areas. So if no sustainable alternative exists, individuals are more likely to opt for private cars, even if they have a high preference for sustainability. And another group is really subjective factors, and those really more involve perceptions, preferences, and regular daily habits of people that influence their decision making. So, for example, then when sustainable transport is available, individuals still may continue to use private car because they're just used to it in a daily life, and they have some psychological attachment to this transport mode. And finally, also, we all know that this political context, policies, and regulations also play a significant role in shaping mobility behavior, and actions like investment in infrastructure, incentives to sustainable travel, or parking policies, like we just heard, can really significantly impact the attractiveness of sustainable transport options. And we really need to consider these factors because nudges can be really tailored to address the specific barriers that individuals face in reaching nature areas. So then again, knowing these determinants of mobility behavior can increase effectiveness and impacts of a nudge that we develop. So on the next slide, we really see that development of the effective nudges for sustainable mobility also require understanding of existing mobility patterns and barriers. And in modal shift, like we usually think the transition from one transport mode to another, and typically we are moving towards more sustainable options like public transport, cycling, or walking. And on this slide, you see some examples of the modal shift barriers. And these examples can be seen as a framework conditions to develop nudges, but also they can represent a goal that nudge can be directed at. So by addressing the specific needs of tourists, such as flexibility, conform, and ease of access, nudges can help to overcome certain existing barriers of sustainable modes, but also by providing clear, accessible information, they actually can facilitate and guide people to more sustainable choices. If we go to the next slide, and I really try to go fast because I think some information you also heard in the previous conversations, and my presentation just summarized it all together in one picture. So yeah, the nudges, as we heard already, are subtle interventions designed to influence behavior without really limiting choice or enforcing rigid regulations. And in tourism, nudges usually guide visitors towards sustainable mobility options or modes like walking, cycling, or using public transport, while still preserving the option of driving. So really the goal is to encourage positive behaviors without restricting freedom or imposing penalties. And this is really the key principles of whole nudging, that they should be non-intrusive, there should be ease of avoidance, and they need to be non-compulsory, again, ensuring that individuals still retain the freedom to opt for alternative option if desired. And usually nudges in what we observe that nudges for sustainable mobility behavior to nature areas, they're really focused on guiding behavior through education, persuasion, and environmental adjustments rather than enforcement. And I think previous speakers also mentioned it. So that by its character, nudges really grounded in behavior economics, right? So we really explore how cognitive preferences and decision making influence people choices. And then these preferences, such for example, preference for familiar travel option or tendency to follow social norms like others do, they really can be used to promote sustainable actions in tourism. And we need to understand how people typically make decisions, and then nudges can be really designed more effectively towards eco-friendly interventions. So if we go to the next slide, we can really see that what we saw in the literature review, that main type of nudges are deployed in encouraging sustainable tourism mobility into nature areas. We really saw 3 types of nudges. So type 1 nudges, they subtly modify the environmental context to influence automatic and subconscious behavior without really requiring active decision making. And these nudges, they work by adjusting physical surroundings to guide individuals toward desired actions. And in nature areas and in mobility, examples would be like strategically placed trails or signage that subtly direct visitors along designated paths. And this nudge then reduce environmental damage, and they guide visitors away from sensitive ecosystems, promoting natural conservation. And usually these are really like the effectiveness of this type of nudges lies in their ability to influence behavior without visitors needing to consciously decide to act on it upon in particular way. And that's the main difference with the type 2 nudges that we saw being deployed, which really engage automatic and conscious decision making, triggering active choices of people to act on a nudge based on emotional and their cognitive signals they receive. So these nudges, they pull psychological preferences, and they encourage individuals to reflect on their own actions and to make sustainable decision. And for example, in nature areas, we saw that these are really interactive signs that display the environmental impact of littering, for example, and then they are combined with actionable advice like using waste bins, and then they form this type of a 2 nudge. So because these nudges, they really generate emotional responses through different images or appeals or information, and they encourage visitors to make conscious effort to protect the environment. And usually this type 2 nudges, they really have more long-term behavioral changes. And finally, we also saw the so-called green nudges that really aim specifically to promote environmentally responsible behavior, such as, like, for example, outside of nature areas, reducing energy consumption or reducing actually transport emissions. And the challenge of these nudges, while they are really increasing in popularity, it lies in the fact that they usually have this invisible impact, and this reduced direct engagement of the public. But despite this, still research shows that green nudges, like this feedback system or social comparisons, they really have been effective in encouraging sustainable behavior to and within nature areas. So my last, one of the last slides is really of this presentation is really shows some effective nudging techniques for environmental behavior in nature areas that we have identified in our literature review, also in relation to the nudging for sustainable mobility behavior. So social norms is one of them, because social norms, they influence the human desire to conform to social expectations, and they often influence behavior through social comparison. And this type of nudge really taps into this crowd instinct, where individuals, they align their actions with the majority, even at the expense of their own beliefs. So there's really this profound behavior change, psychological patterns behind it. So then the social norms are widely used in environmental contexts, with examples like informing individuals about the behavior of others. And I think in one of the previous presentation, we had one example about it. So then by communicating these norms really clearly, it is possible to nudge people towards more sustainable behavior. Then also feedback nudges provide individuals with clear, tangible feedback on the impact of their actions. And this is often done through visualizations or monetary incentives. So these nudges are really particularly effective in environmental contexts. For example, like showing how much energy a person has saved, or the cost savings associated with, maybe sometimes coming by car versus public transport, or cycling or walking to the nature area. And this really can motivate people to adopt more sustainable behavior. And these feedback nudges, they make the consequences of actions more visible, and this way they help individuals to understand their own environmental impact. And finally, really priming nudges, they subtly influence decision-making by evoking specific emotions or thoughts without conscious awareness. And these nudges, they prepare individuals to make certain choices by activating more their mental associations, often through like sensory cues like videos or images or maybe sounds. So they're really used to invoke emotional responses, such as feelings or empathy to environment, and that's why they're really powerful on the long term. So then I really have a final slide to showcase examples that we have mentioned in our literature review as effective nudges. But I would just invite you to, if you go to the last slide, I would just invite you to read our literature review to get acquainted with these examples of nudges for sustainable also mobility behavior or sustainable behavior at nature areas. So sorry I ran a bit fast through this presentation, but just to make sure that you can all enjoy your lunch on time.
Perfect, thank you. On one of these best practices we had presented here, so we were really lucky. I'll be very short. First of all, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for all your presentations. Thank you for all your insights. It was really interesting. Marco, can you move to the next slide? There should be, exactly. So just to let you know that we have in-person capacity building in Saarland in May, but where you can also join online, and the next Mono webinar on routing in June. And I also would like one last thing to thank all the participants, because no one left, even though we went over the time 10 minutes. So thank you to all of us. And we will get back in touch with you with the presentations and also share the recording. So you will hear from us. Thank you to everyone and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.